Project R&R, Release and Restitution for Chimpanzees in U.S. Laboratories, a call to end research on chimpanzees in the United States. Chimpanzees hold a unique place between humans and other animals. Chimpanzees and humans share 98.8% of their DNA. Biologically, they are more closely related to humans than to gorillas. Chimpanzees have emotional, social, and intellectual needs, once believed to be the exclusive domain of humans. In spite of, and often because of, these similarities, chimpanzees have been used and abused at the hand of science. This presentation reveals the harm and suffering inflicted upon chimpanzees in the name of science in the United States, the largest user of chimpanzees for research in the world. It explores why chimpanzee research is not only inhumane and unethical, but also unproductive, a waste of precious tax dollars, scientific resources, and time. Finally, it reveals reasons for hope, including the growing number of countries now banning or limiting research on chimpanzees. NEAVS believes the American public is ready to join this moral community. Project R&R is a call to release all remaining chimpanzees in U.S. labs and provide them the restitution in sanctuaries they so deserve. As ambassadors between humans and other animals, chimpanzees can lead the way to greater compassion for all non-human species whose life and will are destroyed in the name of science. In the wild, chimpanzees are facing extinction. At the turn of the century, 1 to 5 million chimpanzees lived in Africa. Today, there are only about 150,000 left. Free-living chimpanzees are classified as an endangered species. Captive chimpanzees in the U.S. are classified only as threatened, allowing their continued use in research. In the early 1900s, Dr. Robert Yerkes traveled to Africa and was captivated by great apes. His book, Almost Human, details their intricate emotions, but his awe did not stop him from concluding that chimpanzees would make good subjects for experimentation. In 1930, Yerkes established the first U.S. chimpanzee laboratory at Yale University. Today, the Yerkes National Primate Research Center in Atlanta bears his name and remains one of 6 federally funded chimpanzee research facilities. During the 1950s, the Air Force captured 65 baby chimpanzees in Africa to use for air and space experiments. Many chimpanzees were killed or severely injured during high-speed crashes to test wind blast, acceleration, and trauma impact. Some were strapped into small, pitch-dark metal capsules or spun, jettisoned, catapulted, and subjected to decompression or supersonic speed. Researchers used straitjackets, neck rings, and restraint of all 4 limbs, as well as painful electric shocks to force young chimpanzees to comply with testing procedures, including remaining for increased periods in coffin-like capsules. Though only 2 chimpanzees were actually sent into flight, many more were trained to be capable of a mission. By the end of the 1960s, the Air Force stopped using chimpanzees. Rather than protecting them, the Air Force leased them to other research facilities. Many would spend the next 30 years in laboratory confinement. By 1995, the Air Force began to divest itself of 141 chimpanzees. They sent most to the Colston Foundation, a biomedical research facility with numerous and recurring USDA citations for abuse and neglect. Colston's history of violations included numerous whistleblower complaints from its own employees. Captured from their homelands, chimpanzees were bred at Yerkes, Colston, and other facilities to produce future generations for research. While field and behavioral studies showed the world how, like us, chimpanzees are, these discoveries did not prevent science from continuing to exploit them. Among other things, chimpanzees in biomedical research have been killed for organ transplants, poisoned in toxicity testing, infected with deadly viruses, had portions of their brains removed, and left to die of treatable diseases. A former lab worker describes the suffering of one chimpanzee, Jerome. He was so severely weakened that he had a difficult time holding his head up. At times he would hang his head and sob quietly. Other times he would climb down and curl up in a fetal position on the floor. I desperately wanted to go in and hold him. Laboratory life is fraught with stress. Chimpanzees live in uncertainty and fear of what will be done to them next. Add to that boredom and loneliness, and it is clear why so many display psychotic behavior. Among the routine stresses of laboratory life, procedures called knockdowns are among the most traumatic. Because of their strength, chimpanzees require anesthesia for almost all procedures, even routine blood draws. Knockdowns entail one or several lab workers shooting dart guns loaded with anesthetic. It can take up to 5 darts to down an adult chimp. Some have had to endure more than 200 knockdowns. Scientists erroneously assumed that chimpanzees would be an ideal model to study human health and disease, an assumption that has been disproved time after time. Chimpanzees react differently than humans to disease and drug therapies. Drawing conclusions from misleading animal research has had fatal consequences for humans and wasted crucial time in relieving human suffering. Scientists have used chimpanzees as living test tubes to grow infectious agents, including dengue, Ebola, malaria, respiratory syncytial virus, Kuru, and others that cause prolonged suffering and death. They have been used to study deadly diseases such as syphilis. They have been fed head meat, brain and spinal cords from cattle known to have mad cow disease. Hepatitis research remains the largest area of chimpanzee use. Nearly 1/3 of federal chimpanzee research dollars in 2003 and 2004 went to hepatitis studies, totaling well over $5 million a year. But chimpanzees respond to the hepatitis C virus differently than humans. These differences provide little or even erroneous information about how the virus acts in humans. In the early 1980s, the AIDS epidemic reached the U.S. When scientists discovered that HIV could also infect chimpanzees, a breeding program was launched to provide large numbers for AIDS research. But it was soon discovered that infected chimpanzees do not become sick. For example, this HIV-infected individual died of organ failure, but never developed symptoms of AIDS. Tom was inoculated with HIV in 1984 and endured over 369 knockdowns. He's now in a sanctuary and, like other HIV-infected chimpanzees, has never developed AIDS. Such differences between humans and chimpanzees can lead to tragedies. As eminent French biologist Dr. Claude Rice noted, in the early 80s, the observation that HIV does not affect the chimpanzee-led experts to assume that the virus is harmless to humans too. They consequently advised health authorities to allow transfusion with contaminated blood samples. the very cause of the French blood scandal that claimed thousands of innocent victims. Chimpanzee use in HIV and AIDS research peaked in 1998 and has declined ever since. Despite years of confinement, multiple knockdowns, repeated bunch liver biopsies, and other traumas, they proved a poor model. Even so, small numbers are still used. In 1997, 11 years after the launch of the breeding program, NIH, the National Institutes of Health, acknowledged the chimpanzee model of AIDS had been only of limited success. Others call it a dismal failure. NIH assembled a panel of experts to decide the fate of whom they now call surplus. Following this admission, a report was issued by the National Research Council. The report led to the CHIMP Act, the Chimpanzee Health Improvement, Maintenance, and Protection Act, signed into law on December 20th, 2000. For the first time ever, a federal law required lifetime care for former research animals and prohibited killing them when they were no longer needed. It authorized a federally supported sanctuary system to retire chimpanzees not needed in research. However, one of the major flaws of the CHIMP Act is that it fails to provide permanent protection. The government may recall chimpanzees for research. Nevertheless, other provisions of the CHIMP Act provided chimpanzees an ethical status not previously granted to any species other than humans. The time to provide release and restitution to all chimpanzees in all U.S. laboratories is at hand. Major laboratories are closing. In 1995, the Air Force retired 30 chimpanzees, then 21 more in 1997. In 1997, LEMSIP, the Laboratory for Experimental Medicine and Surgery in Primates, closed and released 109 chimpanzees into sanctuaries, including Fauna Foundation. In 2002, Colston, the world's largest chimpanzee lab, closed as a result of its own infamous reputation and pressure from those concerned for chimpanzees. As a result, 266 more joined former Air Force chimps in permanent protection at Save the Chimps. Public opinion polls indicate ever-growing support for chimpanzees. Even some scientists acknowledge the likelihood of an end to chimpanzee research. Dr. John Strandberg, a director of comparative medicine at NIH and a key policymaker, publicly acknowledged that a ban on chimpanzee research would not surprise him. He said, "The public perception of this is evolving." The laboratories are closing. The ethics are challenged. The science is failing. And the public is committing to the release and restitution of our next of kin. The groundwork is set. Sanctuaries have been established for survivors from laboratories. Privately funded, they promise lifetime care and permanent protection from all research and exploitation. Staffed by dedicated people, sanctuaries provide as rich a life as captivity can offer. The world's largest chimpanzee sanctuary, Save the Chimps, founded by Dr. Carol Noon, is a network of islands on 200 acres in Florida. Some 300 chimpanzees, the vast majority from research, now spend their days in relative freedom and sunshine. The Fauna Foundation, the first sanctuary to accept HIV-infected chimpanzees, spared them from future research. Founder Gloria Grow tours with NEAVS, enlightening audiences about the wonders and hardships of these former research victims. Residents have free access to outdoor islands and can travel around the sanctuary in skyways. Today, roughly 1,300 chimpanzees in publicly funded research facilities are waiting for caring sanctuary and permanent protection from science. From research to release and restitution. Please add your voice to the public outcry for better and more humane science. Help release and provide restitution to all chimpanzees in all U.S. laboratories. For more information on what you can do to help end research on chimpanzees, visit www.releasechimps.org. Project R&R is a campaign of the New England Anti-Vivisection Society.